Exploring the bizarre. Unveiling the unseen. Unraveling the unknown. And shedding light on dark realities. Welcome to this mysterious world.
Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of This Mysterious World. I'm your host, Jay Fonzarelli, but some of my closest friends call me Fonz. Feel free to do so, or you can just simply call me Jay. Now, who am I, and why am I creating this here podcast? Well, I'm someone who has always been passionate about these sort of topics and stories that we'll be discussing here on this show. What topics, you may ask? Well, we'll be discussing things like the unexplained, the mysterious, the strange, the things that go bump in the night. Everything from conspiracy theories, the paranormal, cryptids, UFOs, aliens, and more will be talked about here on this podcast. Ever since I was a young kid, I was always fascinated by TV shows like In Search of, The Twilight Zone, and Tales from the Dark Side. Into my teen years, I found radio and this little show called Coast to Coast AM, hosted by Art Bell. Now, this is a show that truly fascinated me because Art didn't make it about himself as many of the disc jockeys and hosts did back in the day. He made it about people like you and me. Quick side note, here at one time, I was actually in the late 90s, I actually lived in a small town in Nevada called Pahrump, just outside of Area 51, right down the street from Art Bell. Now, I never met Art, but I did meet his wife at that time, Ramona. She was on his shows a few times, but she was a very nice lady, but I never got to meet Art. I say that to say this. Seeing where Art did his show, and when I say this show was a mega show, think Joe Rogan scale show back in the 80s and 90s and into the 2000s. The man was huge. Coast to Coast was massive. It's still pretty big today, hosted by George Norrie, but it's not the same. Nobody did it like Art. And the crazy part about it is he did it from this little home of his little compound, in this secluded tiny place in the desert, so to speak. And it was just fascinating to me that he had such a large audience, taking calls late night, having regular people do the talking and the storytelling that just made his show truly captivating. I listened to it just about every night and loved the way Art did his thing. Now, I would never compare myself to Art Bell because he's a legend, but what I want to get out of this little podcast here, because it is very minuscule, I'm just starting out here, is that same kind of radio late night vibe of his show. I love that. I want to make this show more about you as well. So this here podcast we'll have a phone number, we'll have an email for you guys I've already put this stuff out there, and I did get a single email. So I'm grateful to you, Rob. Thank you for sending in an email with an encounter we'll be talking about later. I'll actually be reading that live on the air. And that's another thing about this show. It's a little nerve-wracking for me because I'm going to have to do a lot of reading of stories and stuff from you guys, but that's part of the magic. I think with shows like this, the magic lies in you. The magic lies in the audience telling their stories and sharing with us, and just all of us getting goosebumps and the back of our, the hairs on the back of our neck standing up, listening to this kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff that I really like. So yes, eventually as we grow, I will have guests. I will have people come on with different, backgrounds, maybe experts in their fields, and also people like you that may have some compelling stories to tell. So that's what I want out of this show. So right now, I want to welcome you to this mysterious world and ask that maybe for an hour or so, You just sit back, relax, let your skepticism take a back seat to entertainment. Now, let's get ready for some news that some may even call weird. All right. First up, we've had a few stories to tell this week in the news. First up, we have a man set himself ablaze in front of the courthouse where Donald Trump was on trial at around 1:30 p.m. last Friday. Maxwell Azzarillo took multiple pamphlets out of his backpack and threw them in the air before pouring a flammable liquid on his body and setting himself on fire. The pamphlets included links to his Subtract page where he talked of several conspiracy theories regarding our government. You don't say. Before he set himself ablaze, everyone he had talked to that day reportedly heard him say this, that both political parties are corrupt. I can't even speak. He also spoke of an impending catastrophe and that we are all victims of a totalitarian con by our own government, along with other allies that will soon hit us with a fascist world coup. There is a manifesto he left behind that you can read yourselves, but take that for what it is, folks. This is one man's interpretation of how he feels and what he feels to be true. But you can read the manifesto yourself. It's out online. You can find it, and you can come to your own conclusions on that. All I will say is this: whether this person was of his right mind or not at the time, he definitely believed it to be true. But again, I'll leave that up to you to figure those things out and read that manifesto. And it's pretty interesting. I'll further say this, though, about that, just to close it out, that I don't think there's ever a time where anyone should take their own life, because in my humble opinion, it's just about the most selfish thing you can do. Next up, we have hackers can now turn your headphones into surveillance microphones with malware. A team of researchers from Israel's Ben Gurion University have announced the creation of a malware program that can hijack the speakers in any pair of earbuds by repurposing a computer's audio chip, turning that pair of headphones into a speaker that can secretly record your conversations from over 20 feet away. We've already got people putting tape over, their cameras on their laptops and stuff. Now you're going to have to be pulling those plugs, those earbud plugs, out of your computers as well. But here's the thing, folks. If something like this is out there in the news, this kind of technology, I say this stuff is probably very rudimentary to what we can really do, or at least our government anyway. So take that for what it is. In other news, declassified documents released by the Pentagon office charged with investigating UAPs, or an unidentified anomalous phenomena, UFOs, maybe just say UFOs. I don't know if it's just me, folks, but I will always call it UFOs. This UAP thing is just not for me. This unidentified anomalous phenomena doesn't sound right, doesn't sit right with me. I don't know about you, chat. In any case, these documents that were just declassified now reveal the existence of a government program to reverse engineer alien technology that apparently never got off the ground. Kona Blue was the name of the proposed program, and in these documents laid out a budget between $12 million and $15 million for the first year. The second year would be $25 million. And eventually, the operating expense was to be $50 million a year. And we all know who would be paying for that one. The purpose of this national security was the goal of accessing recovered advanced technology and determining its threat capability. So why is our government claiming that the program never got off the ground? Well, the DoD, the Department of Defense, of course, said it tossed the Kona program out for one simple reason. They never found any alien technology to reverse engineer. Now, I call bogus on this because to me, this is just another cover-up thing. There have been way too many sightings and reports of government agencies from around the world, including our own, from credible eyewitnesses, mind you, that state that we have indeed recovered objects, and in some cases, the pilots of said objects. Way too many stories from way too many credible eyewitnesses to these sorts of events, in my opinion. Are there people out there that would lie about this stuff? Of course. But there have been many credible people who have no reason to lie and had no monetary gain to do so that have come forward with information since the 1940s. So, who knows? But I believe in this, okay? UFOs is one thing that I really do believe in. Now, of course, I've never seen, someone recover or our government recover a UFO, but I have seen something or some things in the past. One of those stories I'll tell you about is way back in 1994. I was camping with an ex-girlfriend at the time with her family, and we decided it was a warm night. We were going to just lie in the back of her father's pickup truck, throw a couple of sleeping bags in there, and sleep outside. It was a beautiful night. Saw so many stars and stuff up in the sky. And as we were looking, I told her, I said, we can find moving satellites up there. You can find them. You can see satellites, and on a clear sky, you can do that. And so I thought I saw one. And I said, okay, there's one right there. I pointed it out. She saw it. And as soon as she saw this thing did something that none of our aircraft are capable of doing, because you would immediately die if you were piloting something and it did something like this. It totally defied the laws of physics. So as it was moving across the sky, it immediately made this right angle turn, like so fast, and just took off and was gone, out of sight. And folks, we just don't have that type of craft. If we do, it's nothing I have ever heard of, and the government claims themselves that they don't have anything like that. So UFOs, call it what you will, UAPs, UFOs, whatever it is, I believe in that. I don't know if you guys do, but I definitely do.
Interested in sharing your story? Reach out to Jay via email at thismysteriousworldpod@gmail.com or leave a voicemail with your short story at area code 510-747-8160. Don't forget to include your contact details for a potential interview. Now let's return to This Mysterious World.
All right. So as I told you, I've gotten one email this week. This email comes from Rob from Washington. Colt, if you're listening, he's from your neck of the woods. Not exactly, but he's up there with you in Washington. And he has a cool story here, or at least a compelling story, that I'm going to read here for you guys. Eventually, like I said, I want to get people to be able to call in and tell their stories, and we can ask questions and that sort of thing. And I think it'll be a lot of fun to do so, because again, the magic lies in you guys for a podcast like this. Anyways, being live and all. So let's get into this story. Hello, Fonz. My name is Rob. I've been a longtime listener of your gaming podcast and was excited to hear that you were going to be doing this new podcast on the unexplained. You see, I'm around your age, nearing 50 years old. Gosh, Rob, why do you have to remind me of such a thing? But anyway, he goes on to say, and in my almost 50 years of life, I've never experienced anything quite like what I'm about to share with you, and have never told this story publicly. My wife and I live in Oregon, and back in February of 2018, we decided to head up to the Olympic Peninsula for a few days on a short getaway. We drove up Highway 101 along the Hood Canal to Port Angeles and finally to Forks, where we ended up staying at a local motel. The next morning, we hit the road towards one of the places we love to visit there. We drove south on Highway 101, then took the Upper Hoh Road east to the Hoh Rainforest. This trip is still so vivid in my mind as it was a very rare, not only dry but clear day for February. And we had the greatest time, in complete awe of what the local beauty the forest had to offer on such a perfect day. If you haven't been, I'd highly recommend it, and maybe you too can possibly witness what we encountered that day. On our way back, there wasn't much traffic at all, but as we reached a stretch of road that was about less than half a mile long, on the right side of the highway, I saw this huge creature. It stepped out of the trees, then onto the road, and crossed over to the other side in just a few strides. When I tell you this thing seemed to just vanish as it made its way into the woods, I'm not exaggerating. It was just gone. I could hardly speak as I slowed down a bit just to see if I could see this thing any further. Needless to say, I couldn't. Again, it was just gone. Without saying anything, I turned to my wife to see her eyes glued to the forest as we passed. I don't think I've ever seen her eyes that wide open for anything the whole time we've been together, and I'm willing to bet that my eyes looked the same to her. We were just in a moment of confusion at what we just saw. I mean, this thing, Fonz, was like 7 to 8 feet tall if I had to guess. It was big, but it was also covered in very dark brown, maybe even black hair. We couldn't see it at that point, so I continued to speed up, heading back to the motel. And as we were going back to the motel, my wife started to describe exactly what I witnessed as well. And in some way, this kind of gave me some comfort in knowing that I wasn't going crazy. Now, I've always lived in the Pacific Northwest and grew up hearing stories of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, but I personally never knew anyone who was close enough that seen anything like this, and I definitely didn't ever expect to see one myself. So you can say that until this day, I have been a really big skeptic of such a large creature. But seeing it with my own eyes, Fonz, changed all of that. I gotta tell you, if this were some sort of costume, it would have been the best costume ever made. I mean, the hair, the way the body moved while in stride, it was almost human-like, but not quite. My wife and I will talk about it every now and again, and especially when we're passing through an area with lots of surrounding trees. But we definitely are always now on the lookout for another possible glimpse of this creature, as we both now believe Bigfoot to be very real. Wishing your show great success and looking forward to hearing experiences from others as well. Big fan, Rob. Thank you for that, Rob. I appreciate that so much. The one and only email I've received, but hey, it's a start. It's a start. Thank you. It really is. It's a start. Now that story you heard is like one of millions out there from all walks of life, folks. Again, tonight's topic is indeed about these bipedal, ape-like creatures commonly referred to Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Whether you believe it to be true or not, there have been many accounts just like that one of this elusive creature going back to the late 1800s, at least here in America. I can, of course, talk about the well-known Patterson film taken by Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin near Bluff Creek, California in 1967, which, by the way, in my humble opinion, is just about the best or most convincing video there is. And the reason why I say that is just like Rob was saying with his sighting, if that was a costume, it's the best costume he's ever witnessed. And that's kind of what we're seeing with the Patty film, as it's dubbed, with the Patterson film there. And for me, it's like over the years, they've put it in 60 frames, so it's much smoother. They've kind of enhanced the video to where you can actually see the muscles moving and more facial features and fingers and stuff. It looks pretty darn convincing. Now, I'm not saying I believe completely, but part of me would like to believe that, just the mystery of some like elusive creatures that could be out there in these forests, in these massive forests out there that aren't really, used much except for some loggers and stuff like that at times, who, by the way, have mentioned that they've seen these things. Many loggers have talked about these things for many years, but just knowing that something might be out there, it's just cool. It fascinates me. And I don't know if you guys are like that, but that's the way it is for me. Now, what if I told you that there was a situation in which several Bigfoot were not only seen, but Bigfoot bodies were moved, and some, still living, were even helped by people? Tonight, we will focus on a couple of accounts from two different witnesses surrounding one specific disaster in the Pacific Northwest. So let's go ahead and read a couple of accounts here. May 18th, 1980, Mount St. Helens, Washington. For the first time in over 100 years, Mount St. Helens volcano erupts, causing damage for 100 square miles, killing 57 people and thousands of animals. Nearly a week later, crews were sent in to clean up the ash and recover these thousands of animals that were left in the path of this mountain's destruction. There have been many stories detailing that there was more than just dead animals being recovered. In one of those accounts, a Mr. Bradshaw, whose father was a supervisor for Weyerhaeuser, one of the largest forest management companies in that region, well, it's said that this Bradshaw was sent in to the Spirit Lake area to help keep the curious folks out of the way of a helicopter landing site that was hastily constructed. He describes how the National Guard collected the carcasses of dead animals in heaps and piled them up high for eventual cremation, via napalm, of all things. Deer in one pile, elk in another, and so on. The corpses were covered with tarps. Mr. Bradshaw was placed in charge of one pile of the dead animals in particular. That pile was covered and it was guarded by the National Guard. On one of the days he was there, by this pile, on that day, can't even read. He was standing near the pile and he was told to keep his mouth closed on what he was about to witness. When the tarps were moved, he was amazed to see that the bodies were those of Sasquatch, some badly burned and some not. They were placed in a large net and lifted into the back of a truck, which was then tarped over. Bradshaw asked one of the guardsmen what would happen to these bodies, and the guardsman replied, "They'll study them or whatever. I don't know. I don't want to know. It's like every other thing here. You don't ask." Later that day, his father and the rest of the crews were debriefed, told not to talk about it, and were sent home. That's kind of a fascinating account, in my opinion. And there's another one that goes along with that, folks. In another story from that same time frame, a man who wished to stay anonymous had this to say. "I was a National Guardsman at the Mount St. Helens site, and this is the first time I've ever spoken about it. I lived in Spokane, Washington at the time, and I was 24. I have read some of the other stories, and they only tell part of the story. I was placed on a special cleanup crew farther up the mountain. A large tent was set up, and it was guarded by armed soldiers who were not part of the guard. There were numerous soldiers on that scene that were not members of the guard. We were given a briefing by a soldier who said that after he spoke with us, we would forget about him and what he had to say at the end of this mission. This was strange, as we've never dealt with anything like this before. Myself and 4 other guardsmen were told to follow a group of soldiers and not to speak to each other and to remain quiet. We were told to get into a Jeep and wait. We sat in the Jeep for maybe a half hour or so. Eventually, another Jeep arrived carrying a civilian and another member of the military. The civilian was brought into the tent, and he emerged a few minutes later, followed by a large, hairy creature. It looked like a large man covered in fur. The best way I could describe it was that it was like Beast from X-Men, only brown. The creature looked to have been burned and had a bandage on its arm. At first, we were afraid, but then it walked by and we could see its eyes, and it just looked sad and somber. He climbed into the back of one of the trucks with the civilian, and the two were talking in this weird language I had never heard. During this task, we were given commands to follow the truck to different areas. There were 5 total stops. Each time we stopped, we were told to follow the civilian and the creature. We followed them into these rocky areas where there were caves. And at each cave, the creature would make a sound at the entrance and then listen. At the first one, he made a sound, and we all just waited in silence. After a few minutes, the creature looked at the civilian and then turned at the ground. The civilian at one point touched its shoulder and called for a canteen for the creature to have a drink. The same thing happened at the next stop, but this time there was a response to the sound the creature made. After a few minutes, the 2 soldiers emerged from the cave carrying a badly burned creature just like the one we were with. The creature bent down next to it, looked it over for a few minutes, and then spoke softly with the civilian. Then it turned, walked back to the truck where we were. As we were all walking away, we heard one shot, and we knew it was one of the soldiers putting the badly burned creature out of its misery. There was no response at the 3rd or 4th site, but at the 5th, there was another return sound to the creature. This time, it was different, and soldiers carried out a creature with a badly burned left leg. We were then ordered to all help get the very large stretcher from the truck and help place the creature on that stretcher and carry it back to the truck. We then immediately returned to base camp. The creature was carried into the tent while the other creature and the civilian spoke. We were ordered to stay in the Jeep until we were debriefed. As the creature turned to walk into the tent, it looked at us, made a waving gesture with its hand. We took it as a thank you for what we had done. By the time we were ordered out of the Jeep, we were all in shock. We were called over to an area to be debriefed, and it was just strange. I will never forget what was said because it was not what I was expecting. I thought I would hear, "You took an oath to this country, and now you need to live up to it," followed by an implied threat. A different high-ranking soldier, however, just said, "Look, do you all really want an explanation? You saw what we were doing. These creatures live in these areas. They mean no harm and want to be left alone. Do you really want to do anything to cause them trouble? They're like us in a lot of ways. If you need or want to talk about this, just wait about 30 years, he said. By that time, there will likely be no reason to keep them a secret." Well, that didn't work out too well, because they're still a secret, apparently, if they are real. We were then ordered back into the guard camp. We did not speak of it, and after a few months, I just took the attitude that these things live out there, and honestly, my life is no different knowing it. I only bring it up now because people have been writing a lot about Mount St. Helens and that disaster, and I believe that the whole story should be told. I will also say this: I like to camp, I like to hike, and have done so many times throughout the Northwest. Every time I would go, I would look for signs, tracks and listen for sounds. I never heard anything or seen anything since that day on Mount St. Helens. Pretty weird.
Want to call in? Call Jay now at area code 510-747-8160. Step out of the shadows and be heard.
It's just like Fallout 76, somebody said in the chat. It's just like Tales from West Virginia. I love it. I love it. It kind of is. It kind of is. But here's the thing, folks. I think it's just very interesting, these types of stories. I find them fascinating. Again, not saying I necessarily believe this is out there, but I want to believe. I really do. I want to believe that there's something like that out there. Well, there you have it, folks. Whether or not you believe it, these encounters, I mean, I'll leave it up to you guys on what you believe. I'll just, still keep on thinking about who knows. It's all up in the air for me. I like this sort of stuff, but it's fun to keep an open mind at the end of the day. And again, like that said, the line is open. If anybody wants to call in and talk about anything, it doesn't even have to be about Bigfoot. You can talk about any other thing, UFOs, aliens, the paranormal, supernatural. It's a free for all. Okay. It's a free for all. Now in the future, I'd like to keep things on topic, maybe especially if I have a guest or something. But at times like this, I keep it fun. You guys can call in. If you don't want to call in, I understand. Some of you could be shy, but that number is area code 510-747-8160. The line is open. So anyways, chat, how are you feeling tonight? Did you like this episode? Because honestly, that's about all I had to talk about tonight is that Bigfoot and give you a little bit about what we're going to do here. Honestly, I knew this show wasn't going to be very long, the first episode anyway, because I need audience participation. I need guests. I need all kinds of stuff to really get this going. Because again, I feel like that's where all the magic lies is with you guys and being able to talk to you guys about this sort of stuff. I see King Chaos in the chat. He says, "Hey, Fonz, congrats on the new podcast. I listen to GTL weekly. I appreciate you." Gaz for a special guest. Unless you know what? You never know. You never know on what we can talk about. Maybe some conspiracy stuff with Gaz. I think he likes that sort of thing. In any case, it doesn't look like we're going to get a call tonight, and that's fine. I never expected it. I didn't even expect to get an email from somebody, and that was really cool to get one. So, Rob, thank you. I don't know what he goes by on the YouTubes here, but apparently he follows me on GTL. I appreciate you, Rob. If you want to out yourself, you can, because you told me you're going to be listening, but I get it if you don't want to, especially with telling stories like that. Some people just, they'll mock you for it. Colt Eastwood says, "I can't wait till you get into your ghosts and EVPs." Yes. Yes. Electronic voice phenomena. Yes. That's good. That's good stuff. It's scary stuff, but it's good stuff. Lupe says, "Hey, Fonz." Hey. Frosted Fury 666 says, "I need this intermission theme song as my effing ringtone. It is bumping." Oh, thank you. Oh, I'm getting a call. Hello, this mysterious world. You're on. Hello.
Hello?
Yeah, hello. I can hear you. Who am I talking to? Who is this?
Fonz? Can
Yes.
you hear me?
Yes. Who am I talking to? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
I can't hear you.
No? Try to call back. Maybe something is wrong with the line. I've tested this out. I know it works. Yeah, we had a call. I've tested this stuff out, and it was working today. Yeah, that's crazy that it didn't work out and he couldn't hear me. You know what? Let me try this.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me at all?
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me at all? No, you can't hear me.
Hello?
That's so strange. That's so weird. Well, that sucks. That sucks. I don't know what's going on there, but again, I've tried this and it works. That's odd. Well, I'll definitely be getting to the bottom of that before next week's show, but El Nini says, at this mysterious world, there is asteroid Apophis? What does that say? Coming for Earth in 2029? How will we get to play Fallout 5? I don't know. I haven't heard of that one. I've got to look it up, man. That's scary. That's one of the things that always scares me is, an impending freaking catastrophe, like just a meteor or something hitting us, an asteroid just large enough to wipe out humanity. And one day just boom, lights out. That would be nuts. That'd be crazy. At least it would be quick, I would hope. Oh no. Will it work? Hello? Can you hear me?
I figured I'd give it one more shot. I still can't hear you. I don't think.
Yeah. No, I can't hear you either.
Yeah, I can't hear your phones. Oh.
Yeah, that sucks. So I don't see anything here that is causing anything to shut this down. My microphone access anyway will block see, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, again, that sucks. I've tried this many times. Audio settings, default microphone. Oh, okay. I figured it out. It was doing something crazy. I'm going to try this one more time. Sorry. Excuse me for the technical difficulties, folks.
I hear you now.
You hear me? Yes.
I hear you.
Yes, we got it to work. I figured it out. Look at that. Awesome. How are you? And who am I speaking with? First name only.
Angry hippie.
Angry hippie. Welcome.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about something that happened to me in the late 80s, somewhere between 86 and 89.
Nice.
It was around the time that I'm sure you remember this, when the not Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street TV series was going on in the late 80s.
Late 80s, yeah, 88, 89, I believe, is when that started.
Yeah. So it was around the time that started. I was living in Clementon, New Jersey. I was about 8 years old at the time. And my bedroom was the attic. I had a big playroom with the toy chest and everything, and then there's a separate room where my bedroom was and whatnot. And ever since I lived in that area from 86, I had like posters on the wall and whatnot, and I would wake up in the middle of the night and the posters would always be moving. And, my parents always told me, you're just seeing things that's not really happening and whatnot. Well, one night around 88, 89, I go downstairs to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and I walk back up the steps into my room in the attic, and I look across the playroom into where my bedroom is, and there's this shadowy figure just sitting there, kind of like the thinker, and just looked over and waved at me. Scared the living hell out of me.
Wow.
So I ran down, told my parents, went up, nothing was there. Every other time I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and came up, that figure was always sitting on the side of my bed and just waved at me. I nicknamed him Freddy because the Friday the Nightmare on Elm Street show just started, so I nicknamed him Freddy.
Okay, that is terrifying. But let me ask you something, because you said you had hippie in your name. Were you partaking in any of the devil's lettuce or any other kind of mind altering?
I was 8 years old.
Oh, you're 8. Okay. All right.
No, so I was not. There was none of that going on. But after that first night, every time I seen it, it was always a comforting feeling when I seen them.
Wow.
So it was almost like the spirit of whatever was haunting that house at the time was looking over me.
Wow.
And it's one of the most vivid memories I've ever had. And I always look fondly back on that memory. And ever since then, I've always been into the paranormal, the ancient astronaut theory, and all that. So,
yeah, that's quite a story. So, did anything transpire outside of that? Like after, like, when did it end for you to see that sort of thing?
Well, that particular thing ended when I moved out of the house. The ghost didn't follow me.
Wow.
But, after that, I started like getting into Wicca and all the pagan magic religions and whatnot, and started following most of that. And just the energies and everything I'm a firm believer that there is a cross section between our reality and the metaphysical reality that some people could see, especially at a younger age, because their brains just aren't are more perceptive to other realities that bleed into ours than when we get older.
I have a theory about that as well. It's interesting you bring that up, because I kind of feel the same way. I feel the older you get, the more you lose touch of this stuff. Because I don't know if I have this theory about deja vu. Okay. Deja vu, like things that you would think, like you're doing something and all of a sudden you have a thought that says, oh, you've done this before, right?
Right.
It's happened to me a lot when I was a kid, but as I've gotten older, deja vu has been very, very rare. I mean, but when I was a kid, I had deja vu all the time. Like I could get to the point where like I'm riding in a car and I remember exactly what my parents are about to say. And then I tell them, even turn on the radio, and a song that I knew was on in my mind would actually be on as soon as they turn on the radio. And I'm like, this has happened before. Like several times that's happened. And I think it's all part of like, well, my theory anyway is that we are just reliving our lives over and over, maybe to get it right. I don't know what the issue is, or maybe we're just interdimensional beings. I don't know. Maybe we have a lot going on there, but I do feel like as you get older, you lose touch of a lot of that kind of thing. So
I feel the same way. Like deja vu happened to me a lot more when I was younger. Now it's not deja vu. It's like I remember dreaming about that about a month ago.
Really?
Because you know how you're like wake up from a dream, you're like, I want to remember this dream, and then you forget about it, and then something happens in real life. It's like, oh my god, this is what that dream was. This happened in my dream. I get that a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Angry Hippie, that was a great first call. I'm glad you called in. Thank you very much. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah. I'm glad you're doing this show because I love this type of stuff.
Yeah.
I just got done watching Skinwalker Ranch earlier today, and then this. I'm all about it.
Yeah, me too. And like I said, people that call in with stories and stuff like you did, that is the real magic of shows like this, in my opinion. That's what I love to hear. I love to hear everyday folk and their stories. And that's why I like to read the emails and stuff. That's fine. You know, I can fumble on that a little bit here and there because, again, it's all live here. It's all live. I'm not pre-recording things. I'm not going back and editing stuff. That's the magic of shows like this. And I love it. I love it. So I'm a bit biased too because it's my own show. So, but I thank you for calling.
Thank you. If you talk to Dealer, tell him I love him. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have found you or Boom or anybody else. So
that's awesome.
So thank you for doing this show.
For people listening out there, he's referring to somebody that's in the gaming community. I do a gaming podcast, and so a lot of these people have come over from the gaming community onto this show, and they're welcome with open arms. Thank you very much, Angry Hippie. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on, brother.
All right, no problem. Later. Well, that was our first call, people. That was awesome. Besides the freaking yelling that I had to do at my daughter for not closing her door with a loud fan and stuff going on in there. I apologize for that, by the way. I tried to mute it, tried to get around it, but I couldn't. She couldn't hear me. Anyways, that is the end of this show, guys. I know that it's a bit short, but again, until I can get more guests and phone calls and emails and that sort of thing, it's going to take some time. This is a slow growth process, but eventually it will get better. It will get better. I told you guys that there would be problems on this show tonight, and there was. So anyways, with that said, guys, I want to say have a good night, and thank you for showing up. Everybody who did show up in the live chat, thank you for listening. Everybody that's listening on demand, whether it's here on YouTube or outside on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those streaming platforms, this show will be on there by the morning. We will have that on there. So thank you very much for listening. And until next time, stay out of the shadows, folks.